You wouldn't expect to go to the gym and be able to lift 100 pounds on your first day, So why would you expect that when you have a difficult experience and you're not practicing towards dealing with that, you'd just be able to be magically capable of dealing with that and be incredibly graceful in your response, body, mind, and spirit too, So we're talking about the mind, and it's for me and for some others, I think a little bit easier to focus on the body, but it's harder for me to pick up on have I been, talking to myself negatively for 2-3 weeks, having those, practices over time so that you can get more used to it. And then it does become, more comfortable, and it becomes more automatic too.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. We are your hosts, Bryce III, he, him pronouns, and I'm Liz, she, her pronouns. No, Liz isn't here today. It is just moi doing a solo episode, so we don't get to know what Liz ordered on Uber Eats last night, unfortunately. But I am joined by a good friend of the Phoenix, a good person. Every time that I've had conversation with this person, whether it be about the organization that she has been the president of, or about things within her own personal practice, it's been good conversation, and I'm just looking forward to getting to know her a little bit more today. So I'm excited to welcome Natalya Fearnley to the podcast. How are you, Natalya?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Bryce.
Yeah, no, thanks for being here. I got a whole spiel for how you wanted to be introduced. I don't know if you want me to go through the spiel and give it to them. I could put my a lot of people say, Bryce, you should read for Audible. I could do the Audible voice and do the whole thing. Okay, all right, cool. Thanks for the permission. Natalya grew up in Colorado, but has moved out and back several times, living in Germany, France, and Colombia over the last 16 years. She started a recovery journey by opening the 1,000-pound door at the Phoenix in Denver and attending a yoga class there. She has been sober from cocaine for 14 months and from alcohol for 2 years as of March 14th, 2024. Snaps in the air for that. She has utilized several different programs in her recovery journey, including AA, Advocates of Recovery, Colorado Artists in Recovery, and the Phoenix, but she found her home in Recovery Dharma. She quickly became active in her local Recovery Dharma community and threw herself into being of service to support her commitment to her own recovery. Less than 18 months after her sober date, she was elected to the board of directors and has since become president of the board of Recovery Dharma Global. She also writes a blog, We All Need to Recover, about how we can benefit from taking a look at our addictive patterns, and runs her business Roving Phrase, working as a freelance writer. Her favorite place to be is in nature next to a body of water, and we definitely have that in common. That is a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff that you've experienced and been through. First and foremost, Natalya, how's your energy today?
Feeling a little low energy. It was a busy weekend. I think it's been a busy couple of months, honestly, for me. And I'm just trying to honor that. That's one thing that I talk about a lot in groups and with friends and mentees and everything, is just that's part of my recovery, is learning how to intuitively honor. Today, my goal was to get to the gym before this, and I didn't. I read a book and I had some tea instead. And it's still hard for me to not just push and try to do the things that I think I should do. But so yeah, I'm a little low energy and just trying to honor that today.
I like the phrase to honor. And I know we use words as a way to ingest and incorporate and absolve. I think for me, allow and honor are kind of like synonymous. Allowance is that thing where it's like, okay, I mean, you know, I was going to go to the gym, but I ended up eating a pack of Slim Jims, and I'm going to allow for that today. I'm going to allow for that. And I'm sure, and I'm interested in digging into your own meditation practice, your mindfulness practice, because that's helped me to stop that kind of third voice, that voice between the experience and me, that thing that's like, oh, you shouldn't have, or this shouldn't be, which is something that I got to show up for on a daily basis. Yeah. So how do you use what you've learned to show up in those moments where you have to like honor?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that I always say is that it's an ongoing practice, you know, is that there's no goal that I'm trying to get to. There's no, after I do this amount of meditation or this many practices in yoga, you know, I'll be able to wake up on a day like today and just be fine with the fact that, you know, I feel less, you know, I've got a headache. I didn't feel as good as I wanted to, wasn't able to complete the plans I had. So I think that's what I always remind myself. And whenever I'm speaking to other people, like when I teach yoga, you know, I'm always like saying what I need to hear too, you know. So when I'm speaking to other people, when I'm reminding other people, I'm really reminding myself anyway. And I love how you started this podcast by the idea of, you know, whatever we're doing here, whatever we're saying and whatever conversation we're having is affecting others and is serving others just as it's serving us and in ways that we don't know. Yeah. So yeah, I think just like that ongoing practice, the recognition that the consistency helps, you know, even if it's just 5 minutes. Honestly, in the last week, I've probably done more 5-minute meditations than 15-minute meditations because it's just been that kind of week. But even just taking, you know, those moments to be mindful rather than, okay, I have to sit down on the cushion, I have to meditate. But my practice has really expanded and, you know, into everyday life. Like when I really love Thich Nhat Hanh's books and Dharma talks and his wisdom, which really speaks to when you're washing the dishes, just be really mindful of how the soap feels on your hands and how the water feels on your hands and, you know, what you had on that dish before, you know, if you can be grateful for the meal that you cooked. And, you know, just in the mirror this morning, like I put a little like sticky note on the bottom of my mirror that just says, love the person you've worked to become, you know? So I'm looking in the mirror, washing my face, not feeling great, but I said, I love you. And I've done that. That's been one of my practices, like to look myself in the eyes and say, I love you. And that's been a practice since the very beginning of my recovery that was really uncomfortable at the beginning, but it has become more and more like I mean it now. You know, I mean it and I believe it. And this morning I noticed, I was like, I don't believe it nearly as much as recently. You know, like I need to come back to this practice. There's that consistency. It's feeling a little bit, it feels a little bit weak right now. So let's build the muscle. And I do really think semantics matter too, like you were speaking to. How we speak to ourselves, what we say about ourselves, what we say in our own heads, and even shifting it when you don't really believe it yet is still powerful. So, you know, not necessarily saying you have to have some crazy mantra or affirmation that you repeat all the time, but, you know, just noticing those shifts. And when your mind is starting to go to like, oh, I can't do this, or I didn't do it well enough, or I'm never going to be able to do this. Like I do a lot of absolutes in my speech to myself, like I'm always like this, or I'm never going to be like that. And just like noticing when those absolutes come up and just trying to say, okay, today I'm like this, or, you know, right now I didn't accomplish that, but we can do that later. And yeah, I think that's really it. Like you said, just creating the space, you know, when we come into the practices and we do more of the practices of mindfulness and meditation, it can become really, really obvious that there's the me that's doing the speaking and there's the me that's doing the observing. And there is space between those two. And I didn't really see that. I didn't really know that until I started to actually like commit to that regular practice. And again, it's not perfect now, but I'm more capable of that now.
Yeah, I think you're reminding me of how important like that regular practice is. I have a pretty interesting meditation practice at this point in my life. I think meditation has been a huge contribution to me having that dissonance between the experience and like me.
Mm.
I come from where I felt it and I did it. I was that. If
Mhm.
I'm angry, I'm angry. So my meditation practice has allowed for me to observe and do those things like you share, where you can affirm and almost lean into, and really like ultimately, even from what I hear you share, it's like what recovery is. It's this building a relationship with ourselves,
Mm.
and what tools can we use to kind of bridge that gap between us and how we see the world. And like affirmations myself, there's some affirmations I can't use, like,
Mm.
and I've struggled with affirmations because it's like, I will be a billionaire. I am a billionaire. Like, it's like, bro, like, no, you're not. In my mind, just in spirit, won't accept that and it rejects it. But certain things like self-talk, I just started kind of like slowly but surely, if those things popped up in my head, oh, I'm a bad person, or oh no, I'm such a dummy, or oh, I'm such a yeah. Like
Mhm.
eventually what ended up happening was like, no, I'm not. I would pattern interrupt. No, I'm not. Actually, I'm a
Right.
good person. Actually, I'm trying my best. Actually, I'm doing the best I can with what I've been given.
Right.
And after like affirming myself in those ways, now down the line, because of that practice that you speak of, kind of like getting in the gym, if ever anything goes on and like a semblance of like, oh man, you freaking dumb. And it's like, no, why would you even say that? It's not that serious. And it's almost
Mhm.
automatic now that thing kicks in. It becomes this machine that holds us down that I
Right.
know didn't exist for me when I first got here.
Right. Yeah. And I love that, that you wouldn't expect to go to the gym and be able to like lift 100 pounds on your first day, So why would you expect that when you have a difficult experience and you're not practicing towards dealing with that, you just be able to like, be magically capable of dealing with that and be incredibly graceful in your response. Um,
No.
so having those practices over time so that you can get more used to it, and then it does become more comfortable, and it becomes more automatic too.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found in my recovery is like, it's so, like you said, creating that relationship with yourself is body, mind, and spirit too. So this, we're talking about the mind, and it's for me and for some others, I think, a little bit easier to focus on the body, where you're like, okay, I got to get enough, yeah, eat better, get enough sleep, get more exercise, get out in the sunshine. Those types of things feel to me like they make a little bit more sense. They're like a little bit more straightforward, I guess. When
Mm,
I'm like, well, okay, if I only had 5 hours of sleep, of course that didn't feel good. But it's harder for me to pick up on have I been, talking to myself negatively for 2, 3 weeks? Have I been falling back into those patterns of like responding? One of my patterns is just kind of responding with irritation and frustration to the external world, like
mm.
especially driving, which I used to do, before I got sober. Like I was just an insane driver, and
Are
nowadays
you a
I
road rager, Natalya?
I mean, I was a bit like that before, like, and now I don't, right? But then I'll notice myself slipping back into it just in my head. Someone cuts me off and
Mm,
I'm like, oh, well, and like go onto this spiel in my head, and I don't like speed up or try to get around them or like do the things that I used to do. But if that pattern builds for a couple of weeks, then that mental chatter becomes worse and worse. And
mm,
it's like harder. It's not as straightforward because it's sort of just going on in the background in my mind
yeah.
constantly. Yeah. And then, and those, I think one thing also, going to therapy has really helped. I was talking about something to my therapist and he pointed out, like, you think you're dumb. And I was like, and just start crying.
Mm,
And I had never really pulled that together before because, on the surface, I don't think I'm stupid. Like I feel accomplished in a lot of things I've done. I feel like I pick up on things really quickly and I learn things really quickly. And I've always been like praised for being an intelligent person. But once I was telling this story and once he kind of pulled that belief out and actually spoke it to me, I was shocked by how true it felt. And I didn't realize that that's kind of one of the undercurrents that's going on.
Mm.
Like you mentioned too, like you're just not smart enough. You're not good enough. You're not, going to be able to do this. Even if you try, you'll fail. Those kinds of things that are very insidious and very, just like that static kind of. And it's so hard to
Mm.
pull that out until, obviously doing the meditation, doing the mindfulness practice, yoga really, really helps me. What's one of my favorite things to do.
Okay.
But also therapy, like having a professional to call you out on your shit is very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. Like, at least for me, before I came into recovery, like I had maybe like a crayon box of 4 colors when it comes to like emotions.
Mm-hmm.
My emotional awareness, the spectrum wasn't broad. I was like mad, I was angry, I was sad, and I was scared.
Yeah.
But in recovery, like I've learned sort of the nuances behind why I show up the ways that I show up. And
Yeah.
it's not as easy as me like just showing up and stopping something, because like there's a bunch of motivating factors that are behind that. And that could be emotional, but that could also be cultural. Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
way that I've been able to open up to the world, to my experience. And that has aided in me being able to have compassion and understanding for myself. And ultimately what I'm able to give to myself, I'm able to give to the world. And
Right.
so that leads to a more compassionate and understanding environment that I'm in, because I can contribute in that way. And I'm just like super interested in like how you were even led to the tools that allow for you to show up for life in that way. I know you've mentioned Recovery Dharma. Some people might not even know what Recovery Dharma is. I know I
Mm-hmm.
didn't for the first 3 years of my recovery. So, what was your journey like before recovery, and how did you end up finding Recovery Dharma?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is interesting is my parents were pretty flexible in their beliefs when I was young. So they both, by the time I was like 7 years old, they were both interested in Buddhism. So
Okay.
Recovery Dharma is a Buddhist inspired approach to recovery. It does not require that you are Buddhist or that you practice the religious side of Buddhism. It just takes the tools and wisdom from these ancient Buddhist practices and applies them to a journey of recovery from addiction of any kind. And so, with my background as a kid, I actually visited Plum Village, which is where Thich Nhat Hanh used to live before he passed. And it's
Mm.
his monastic center in the south of France. So, I visited as a kiddo a couple times with my parents. I met him. I remember holding his hand during walking meditation, which is
Wow.
like one of those really powerful memories for me. Like I can remember the feeling of his hand and the presence that he had. And I was
Mm.
only 7 or 8, at the time. I think we went when I was 7 and 9. And so I remember being like, why are we walking so slowly? Looking up at him and being a kiddo. But that I think definitely translated into an interest towards Buddhism and mindfulness, and just again that presence, like that tangible feeling of like this person is right here with me, which in my childhood I didn't really have a lot. Both my parents my parents argued a ton. They ended up separating when I was really young. My mom's a rather difficult person. I felt alone a lot. So
Mm.
I think having that draw, as I think back to it now, having that draw towards being around somebody who was actually just there and really present and really aware was really huge for me. And I kind of strayed away from that. I mean, I started doing drugs in high school. Like I went to college, and I wanted to study international affairs. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to be a journalist, and I got really sidetracked. I started dating somebody a couple years older than me in high school, and we ended up staying together until I was 29, so like until right before I got sober. And we did tons and tons of drugs together, and we
Hmm.
partied, and we went to concerts. We were deadheads. We were concert kids. In part of my mind at the time very much was like, I'm exploring, I'm kind of breaking out of this. I have community now. That's how it felt. I was an only child. I was very alone. My mother was very, very overbearing. So I lived just with her for my high school years. And it really did feel like, kind of like breaking out of that dysfunctional relationship to land into another dysfunctional relationship because I didn't really know how to be on my own, even though that was like what I wanted. I wanted to travel alone. I wanted to go to New York City. I wanted to be a successful professional. But I, again, this is all 2020 hindsight, right? I didn't think this at the time, but just sort of hopped from this codependency to another style of codependency. But it felt like freedom because we were doing whatever the hell we wanted. We were doing any drugs we wanted. We were, we went on a giant road trip together. I could live with him and a bunch of our other friends in, this house during college. And again, the sensation was like, I'm not alone now. And I have this group around me. And so, yeah, I strayed away from practices during that time. I mean, I never really had a consistent meditation practice until the last couple of years during recovery. But I have always exercised. I've always run. I love being in nature and I love yoga. And so I was doing yoga like on and off through college, but then just sort of that fell off. I got busy. It felt like there was never enough time when in reality, I was choosing to use my time like to get high or drunk. And that was partially, I remember days when it was like, oh, well, I just got home from school and I was going to go on a run, but like my friends are already here, so let's like that wasn't a conscious decision, even though in my head, it was very much like throwing up my hands. Like, what can I do? I mean, there's just never enough time in the day to take care of myself. And I remember I would write these lists. I would go up and down. I've always kind of struggled with anxiety and depression. I would go up and down in depressive episodes. And when I would get really down, I would write these lists that were like, okay, I got to get outside more. I have to run every day. I have to journal every day. I need to do meditation in the morning. I need to do my yoga practices at least this many times a week, right? And I would be writing all these lists and again, looking back at it, it was kind of like trying to put a Band-Aid on this gaping wound, where there was just this consistent, I was avoiding myself. I wasn't learning how to deal with my emotions. I wasn't learning how to communicate properly in a relationship or in any relationships. And yeah, like I wasn't learning the tools, the coping mechanisms for being an adult in the world. And so I was becoming incredibly anxious, incredibly depressed. I was like yo-yoing back and forth and then telling myself like, well, if we just run more often, like then you'll feel better, and of course that does help. I was building these layers. That's how I always like to talk about it, like building these layers on top of the person, like the person that I really am and the things that I'm capable of doing. And I was just becoming like more and more numb to the experience of living. I didn't see that at the time. I saw it as this is what everyone does because it is really insidious, in college, especially like everyone parties, everyone does drugs. And especially my crew, my people that I hung out with, it was just not, we would literally make fun of people when they're like, oh, I got probation, so I can't, get fucked up with you guys this week. Like we would just I was definitely at fault for being the person that would pour somebody a shot and put it in front of them, which has since happened to me several times in my recovery. And I'm like, this is karma, as I look back at it, I realized that I just wasn't figuring out how to take care of myself. And therefore I was just falling more and more into disrepair. And there was this like heart inside of me, and there still is this like little girl that's like curious and innocent and interested in the world and intelligent, but also kind of naive in a way. Like I'm terrible at picking up at on sarcasm, and and I was scared. I was really scared. I was super socially awkward when I was little. I was like incredibly shy when I was a little kid. And then that sort of translated into, well, my boyfriend at the time was this big gregarious personality. So I could like hide behind him in social situations. And then also I could get fucked up. So then I didn't have to feel that fear. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess like fast forward a few years into my mid-20s, I was finished with college. I had figured out, I didn't know what I was going to do with my degree. I had studied abroad in France at that point. And come back and I really wanted to leave the country again. I've just always loved learning languages and exploring different cultures. And that's really has been my dream since I was little, was to figure out a way to get paid to travel. Still haven't figured it out yet, but there's time. And my boyfriend and I were just having like these terrible fights. We'd get drunk and scream at each other and throw things. And it was getting worse and worse. And we were trying to figure out ways to fix this. At the time, again, with 2020 hindsight, I think what was happening was that, I needed to leave. Like, we were no longer healthy for each other, and we were spinning each other deeper into our addictions and not acknowledging it. We would say we're professional drinkers. We're not alcoholics, we're professional drinkers. And it was like a big joke that, of course, we drank too much, but like, that's what you do. So instead of, looking at those habits and patterns and trying to solve it, we decided to move out of the country, and that would solve it. And so we packed up everything. We sold everything. We had like very little money and very little plans. And we moved to Colombia, the country. And we were going to teach English there. We had looked it up, and it was relatively easy to get jobs teaching English there. And the cost of living was really cheap. And I wanted to learn Spanish and live near the beach. So yeah, we just up and left. And within a month of being there, it was a really big transition, right? Like, we had our lives on our back. We had again, no plans, which is kind of tough. And so it was really stressful just to transition. And there was a lot of culture shock getting there. And within a month, like, we were back to the arguments and back to the fighting. And, like John Kabat-Zinn says, wherever you go, there you are.
There you were.
We didn't escape ourselves. We didn't escape our problems. And so by the end of the time there, I had asked basically to spend like a year on my own, tried to separate from my partner. We'd been together for 10 years at that point. He went back home to Colorado, and I stayed in South America for a few months and started to slow down. I wasn't doing the harder drugs. I wasn't doing cocaine. We did a bunch of cocaine while we were down there. And then, when I went and traveled on my own, I just drank, but less than I used to. Ended up coming back here to be with him, because as soon as we parted, even though I knew it's what I needed, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And that was really the beginning of the end for us over the next few years. Once we got back here, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I had no rental history. My job record looked really, really wonky. I ended up finding a job teaching English here in Denver, and he had another job in Denver. And I just, and then COVID hit us, and we ended up spiraling into just doing tons of drugs, drinking all day long, because we were home. We were both working from home. We were both maintaining our jobs. I think this is the one thing that, one of the things that always made me convinced that I didn't have a problem was that, I didn't lose my job over it. My partner and I were able to stay together, even though we were miserable for the last few years together. My family didn't know. I could go to family events and drink too much, and they didn't call me out on it. And that's one of the things that made it really hard for me to find recovery, is that I was functional, and I didn't consider myself to have a problem until there was some sort of external force, like I got a DUI or lost my job or had to go to rehab or something. And so that's what I like to speak to a lot, is that, I consider myself lucky, and I'm grateful that certain things didn't happen to me to derail my life in that way. But it doesn't mean that I wasn't experiencing deep pain and really harming myself. And if I had continued that way, who knows what it would have happened. And so I like to really shift that perspective when I'm talking about my recovery, that people look at addicts as like, oh, it's just those people on the street, or, it's just those people that lose their jobs or get DUIs and they're like a menace to society or something like that. There are so many of us that are behind closed doors that look perfectly functional, that show up with makeup on and look nice when they come to work, and they're just fucking miserable in their home lives. And that's much harder to spot and to pull someone out of that. And of course, you have to pull yourself out. You're never going to get sober. You're never going to recover until you decide you're worth it. And it's for you, even if, it has to come from you and it has to be for you. So I know this is a very long answer to your question. I'm almost there, but we I ended up breaking up with my partner a year after in late 2021. And the main reason was that I'd been in therapy. I finally went to therapy. I'd avoided therapy for a long time. My therapist, I was talking to her and I said out loud, I feel like I can't support the health of my relationship and my own health at the same time. And it was something along those lines. And once I said it out loud, I was like, oh, I can't avoid this anymore.
Yeah.
This is not serving me. It's not serving him. And so my goal was to get sober when we split up, but we had been together for 13 years and that was a huge transition too. And so it took me a few more months to find recovery. Within those last 5 years of our turmoil, I had started listening to the Dharma talks from Thich Nhat Hanh again. I had been really drawn back to that. I had read The Laws of Spirit by Dan Millman. I was starting to find this desire for a teacher or a guide or spirituality. I was starting to notice that when I would be alone or I'd try to do yoga, I would just dissolve into tears. There would just be there was this deep well of sadness and exhaustion just sitting in me. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I was just making it deeper, adding more and more water to it with all of my actions. So, I had bought myself an altar and I had set up my little space within those last years. And my therapist at the time started sort of gently pushing me towards hey, maybe you need support. Maybe you can't just do this on your own. I got to the point where I was suicidal. I was doing a lot of cocaine and I was drinking a lot on my own. And I was bouncing myself back and forth between those anxiety and the anxiety and depression that I had always experienced, but making it that much worse. And I came into therapy one day just sobbing and talking about how I'd been on the shower floor and, contemplating, just considering whether or not I was worth keeping around, basically. And that's when my therapist was like, okay, here's the crisis hotline. And here's a list of organizations you could reach out to if you need support. She was very skillful in just gently guiding me towards looking for support. And I was very anti-AA. I was like, well, I don't believe in God in that way. And I'm not a Christian. And I don't want to go to AA. I've always heard bad things about it, And so, and also I was also addicted to cocaine. And I was like, well, it's not just alcohol. So obviously I'm not just an alcoholic. And I ended up looking at the list that she gave me. I really was motivated to go into my next therapy session and say I had done something that week, to good for myself. And I found the Phoenix on that list. And part of my fear of recovery was one, admitting that, I didn't say I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict for probably 6 months into my recovery. And I didn't want to say it. And I didn't want to admit this story to anybody. And I felt fucking ashamed of having this long relationship and this long, all of these, I totally lost the word I was trying to say. I've been very, what's the word? I've had all these opportunities in life, right? My parents helped me go to college. My dad helped me study abroad. I had a lot of opportunities that I felt like I wasted. I did college, I finished my degree, but I barely remembered it. And I was really ashamed at that point. And I didn't want to go into a meeting and talk to people. So when I saw the Phoenix and I saw that it was just a class and I know how to do yoga. And I know that basically you go into a yoga class and you set up your mat and you don't talk to anybody. I was like, okay, that's the one, I can do it. And, I think I woke up on a Monday after my last bender, my last night of drinking. And I was like, I need to get through the week. I just need to not drink this week. And so I signed up for a yoga class that was on a Friday night. And with the 48-hour sobriety requirement, that meant that I at least had to not drink for the Wednesday, Thursday of the week. And I did. I made it through the whole week. And I love that term, the 1,000-pound door. That's why I put that into my bio, because I was so nervous and so scared to just get into the room. And I got into the room and everyone was kind and it was quiet and it was peaceful and the yoga class is really sweet. And I now know Rachel really well because I volunteered. She's my volunteer coordinator. She was the one teaching the class that night. And by the end of the class, a girl next to me just wanted to talk, and she was just like, hey, how'd you find the Phoenix? Is this your first time? And we got to talking, and she recommended the Recovery Dharma meeting that was coming up that weekend. And so that's how I stumbled into Recovery Dharma, and really having that history of recognizing what Buddhism is, having that memory that mindfulness and presence is soothing and comforting and feels protecting, just made it instantly interesting to me.
Mm.
And so I came into the first meeting, again, just nervous as hell. And everyone was really kind and supportive. And it just there was this energy in the room that felt really warm. And again, there was that energy, that like palpable energy of mindfulness and awareness and acceptance. And so that's how I came back into really using the Buddhist practices in my life. And I started going and I didn't stop. And I really do believe that being of service has been probably the biggest motivator for me to continue on my own journey of recovery and continue my own self-care, because I've started volunteering to help lead meetings pretty much right away, and I had to come because there were other people relying on me, and just little things too. Now looking back over the last couple of years, I realized that my journey's been pretty accelerated in a lot of ways towards taking on more and more responsibilities. But just the little things kept me coming back. Just like, hey, I'm going to bring a reading for tonight, or I'm choosing the meditation, so I got to show up, or I'm going to make coffee,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been the biggest. That's the thing I like to speak to the most, and that's one of the things I'm most grateful to the Phoenix for, is how easy it was to become a volunteer. I had taken my yoga teacher training a couple years before I got sober, and taught yoga up until COVID hit, and then started teaching online, and then just stopped teaching yoga because I was like, this feels fake. I'm so broken and I'm so not healthy in myself. And I'm trying to tell other people how to listen to their
Mm-hmm.
bodies and like treat themselves well. Like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And so stopped teaching yoga entirely until 6 months into my recovery. It's 5 months into my recovery, I guess. And then I was able to volunteer with the Phoenix, and it was so easy to become a volunteer. The Phoenix is so supportive. And I was able to regain this sense of confidence in that I have something to offer people, and learn to, you know, find the way to speak about what serves me and what keeps me healthy. And like I said earlier, like, give that back to people and hear myself saying it and receive it even as I'm giving it out. Really, I always believe, I've been a teacher in various ways in my life, that I learn just as much as I'm teaching as my students do, or as the people listening to me do. And yeah, so finding a place to meditate with people. So that's what we do at Recovery Dharma. So at a Recovery Dharma meeting, we'll come in, we'll do some introductions. One thing that I love about the program is that you don't have to introduce yourself in any particular way. You can just tell your name. You don't have to say, hey, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm an addict, or anything like that. And so, like I said, for me at the beginning, that was super supportive. And for the program is really empowering rather than shame based. So, even though there are all these things that I've done that I'm not proud of, the goal is not to dig into those and shame myself for it. The goal is to see why, like, look at the underlying reasons why I did all of those things, and why I was so willing to avoid and hide from, the wholeness of who I am. And then we practice meditation in a meeting. So we'll introduce ourselves, and then we practice meditation together as a group. And I remember in my first meeting just having that feeling. There's like a really a tangible, energetic feeling when there's a bunch of people in a room together, focusing, being present, and just trying to show up. A lot of
Yeah.
the times you're thinking like, what's this guy next to me doing? Or am I doing it right? Or there's a sound over there, or like, oh, my stomach's rumbling and somebody could hear it. Or, like, you're distracted a lot of the time, but we're all trying to show up, and we're intending to bring that presence to this group. And then the intention is to continue that practice on your own in between the meetings. And that really did help me. I put up the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths next to my altar, which are the basis of the program. And I just tried for 5 minutes. That was my goal, 5 minutes in the morning, just to come back to myself. And I had the motivation of, well, I'm going to come to the meeting next week and I want to feel like I've practiced a little bit in between now and then. And, just being able to come back and keep it really, really simple was really how I got started with my recovery and with my mindfulness practice. And yeah, for that, I mean, just the community as well. I realized that, immediately being in that room, the way people welcome me at both the Phoenix and at Recovery Dharma, I felt more included and more supported than I ever had as in this community of, drug addict friends that I thought were my community. Right. And as soon as I got sober and I, left my last relationship, my big relationship, those friends just fell away, which was, and I do have a couple of them still, but most of them just sort of fell away, which was really telling to me. And now, I have this community of people. I went out Friday night with a friend and we talked for 3 hours and, had soda water and the time just went by like that, and I thought I was worried that when I went into recovery, or I was worried for so many years that, the only thing that made me interesting was being able to hold my liquor and have a tolerance to do a lot of crazy drugs with people. But turns out that was just keeping me from that ability to actually really communicate and really connect on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing your journey. There's so much within your journey that I can relate to. I'm sure that the listeners of the show can relate to. I mean, and just even, seeking community. And I feel like there was a commonality throughout your journey where it's like, oh, here goes where I don't have to be alone and I can be around people and I can congregate and maybe even hide in the community. But the community that you found in recovery was a community where you can have all those things, but the opposite of hiding took place, where you came into an understanding of who it is that you are, that you're becoming. And I think the process of sitting with ourselves, I don't think ever ends. I don't think it ever ends. And like you said, it don't matter how many times I show up and I meditate. It's not like a meditation bucket where it's if I fill this bucket, then one day I'll be complete. It's no, and today might be a little different than yesterday was. Tomorrow may be a little bit more complicated or difficult to show up in this realm than the day after that might be. But it's just that process of showing up and practicing, showing up and being in alignment. Another thing that I found was interesting was I couldn't teach yoga anymore because I'm sitting here and I'm telling people to do this thing that I'm not even doing, and it just feels fake. There's a misalignment, and I could definitely relate to that, in my own personal active addiction, where it was I was really big on masks. I put the mask on, and I can Denzel Washington my way through a lot of situations, but I knew I was acting, and nothing felt substantial, and that led to a lot of loneliness. And these days I navigate solitude a lot, but I feel like solitude is what I've been able to alchemize the loneliness into now that I have the ability to really sit with myself and there's alignment. But when I feel alone is when I feel like, okay, I'm not expressed. I feel like I'm not seen. And most times when that's the case, these days is because there's an extra effort that I can find to disclose and express and be more open and more transparent. And inevitably, there's always somebody there because of these communities, like how you found Recovery Dharma, these communities that I've surrounded myself with that are here to prop me up and help me to discover myself. And it's, I don't know, it's just a super dope testament to self-discovery, I think your journey is really what stands out to me. It's like a testament, a pure example of what it's like to seek and discover yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I love that bit about alchemizing um, loneliness into solitude. I think that's like there's a Rilke quote that speaks to that, that the being alone is not this, being in solitude is not the same thing as being lonely. And I was lonely for so many years while I was in groups of people, while I was in,
Mm,
these moments where it was supposed to be, we were all having fun and enjoying ourselves and feeling so connected, but I felt so alone. And nowadays I can, yeah, like you said, like have moments where I'm actually alone and I'm my own best friend, which I know sounds really cheesy. But that's like one of those things that that I have learned through this journey that's ongoing, is that I actually like myself, and I like myself even for the ways that I'm kind of awkward or naive or whatever that is, or, I will protect myself, right? Like I will stand up
mhm.
for myself and I will choose to hold boundaries and choose the path that feels most aligned for me, even if it's not what looks right to other people. And even if, it's not what keeps me the closest to other people. Um,
Yeah.
Even if that means that I lose a connection or a relationship, or that relationship changes or morphs into something that I didn't think it would. I think really another thing I love about Recovery Dharma is that it's trauma informed. So, when you come to a meeting, you can talk about, your mental health issues. You can talk about your past traumas. You can talk about your codependency, your relationship issues, because all of these things relate to why we chose to use substances. And some of us, Recovery Dharma also welcomes people from any walk of addiction, any path. So if substances aren't your jam, you might use something else to avoid your feelings, or to, basically the idea behind the Four Noble Truths that I mentioned before is that there is suffering in life. We can't avoid it, but we do tend to compound it by trying to avoid it, or trying to
Mm.
hold on to what feels pleasurable. So we're either trying to push away the pain or we're trying to grab for the pleasure. And the way there is, the way that we can stop compounding our suffering is by detaching from that push pull, craving,
Yeah.
and aversion. And there is a path to the end of suffering if we are able to become aware and to become more wise in the ways that we act and speak and understand and put effort into our lives and walk with mindfulness, and all of that. And so yeah, like I also tend to pick my skin. That's been a longstanding, I would call process addiction of mine since I was a little kid, since my parents were screaming in the other room and I was trying to find a way to regulate my fear, my anxiety. And so when I come into the rooms, I talk about skin picking. I also talk about my alcoholism. I talk about using cocaine. And I can also talk about those codependent tendencies, those desires to be in relationship, to maybe avoid myself, or maybe just convince myself that I'm worthy of loving, and that I'm, see myself through somebody else's eyes. Um, and that's becoming more and more apparent to me. I mean, as the layers fall off, right now it's been 2 years, 2+ years since using my drugs of choice. I still struggle with the skin picking day in and day out. I've been doing it since I was like 5 years old. So it's going to be a long journey to really
Mhm.
move past that, but I'm very aware of it now. But yeah, and as the layers fall away, now I'm recognizing more of those codependency tendencies and more of those
Mhm.
relational, issues, I guess, that I have that are also a way to try to avoid myself. But it's becoming more and more easy to, I wouldn't say easy, but it's becoming more and more natural, kind of like you said with your self-talk, where I'll notice that tendency of like, oh, I need to like respond to this person, or like, oh, I need to say yes to this invitation because otherwise I'll let them down. And then actually hear that little voice inside me that's like, hey, but that's not what we
Yeah.
want to do. Or like, hey, you're really tired tonight.
Mm.
Why don't you just actually did that last night? I was supposed to play music with a friend and I like couldn't keep my eyes open. It was 6:30 at night. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't keep my eyes open. And I took a bath and I went to bed instead,
Mm.
And it was an uncomfortable feeling, but it's like a testament to that work towards becoming closer to myself that's actually paying off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a testament to, I mean, you have the practice, but then there's the time that we have to practice. And the more that we spend time in practice, the more opportunities there are for us to cultivate wisdom. And
Right.
things, 11 years ago when I first got sober, like things that existed then, like I still feel those emotions, but I show up for them with 11 years of experience,
Right.
So it's like I've had the experience of, so that's like the thing where it's like, just keep showing up. Like keep showing up, keep showing up. I think that's like a big, and I used to dislike very much like when people would like use time, like, oh, I'm older than you, so I know more. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
No.
I'm saying that time does allow for the potential of wisdom cultivation. And when you show up for time in the ways that you're speaking of, practicing and observing self and using, these situations as part of the Dharma, then it allows for you to figure out how to best fit in this world with a little less of the clinging and avoidance. And I mean, even getting into clinging and avoidance, this could be a whole 2-hour episode. We gotta start winding down. But yeah, clinging and avoidance is a whole nother thing. And I think that's a beautiful thing that Recovery Dharma serves as, is a place where you can find Sangha, which is, people that are on the same journey as you, but for them. And you can talk about these things and you could connect. So I know the Phoenix app, we got some dope stuff on the app, and one of the dopest things I think that has popped up within the past year or so is the partner spaces. And so Recovery Dharma actually has a partner space on the Phoenix app. When you pop onto the Phoenix app and go in there, you can find Recovery Dharma meetings right on the app that you can say, I'm coming, and show up. They're virtually, and if you happen to be somewhere where there are Recovery Dharma meetings going on in person, they're in person as well. And you can find all that stuff through the Phoenix app. And I think it's super dope that like the connection, like after hearing you share your recovery journey, in knowing the connection between Recovery Dharma and the Phoenix, and the process of getting like Recovery Dharma on the Phoenix app, like, and how much of a role you played in that, like it's just so synchronous, if that's the word, how everything has played out. So
right, yeah, that is one thing that I love. Yeah, like I remember joining the Phoenix, and then pretty quickly after that joining Recovery Dharma, and then having people go like come to my yoga class at the Phoenix and go, well, hey, why isn't there a Recovery Dharma meeting on there? And I'm like, oh, well, there, we just host our meetings here. The Phoenix is awesome. They let us do that, but we're not the same organization. So for basically like a year and a half, I was kind of poking my volunteer rep to say like, hey, is there a way we can list our meetings on this app? And then within that time period, I joined the board of directors for the nonprofit Recovery Dharma Global. And then within a few months of being on the board and becoming the president, we had this discussion about the partner spaces. So it does really feel, that's like the last thing I'll say is that every step I take in my recovery that is aligned with my health and the health of my community and serving the population of people in recovery just like leads me down another path that offers more opportunities. And I've never felt that experience in my life, that synchronicity, that feeling of guidance from source or the universe or whatever you want to call it, that if I just keep taking the next step, if I keep showing up, more options, more opportunities will open up to me, and I'll find more ways to serve.
Phew, I think I needed this episode more than maybe some of the listeners. It's been an absolute privilege and honor to have you on the show, Natalya. And I knew I would benefit from being in a room with you as you shared your story. Before we go, I'd like to ask you a question. If you can choose any iteration of Natalya, past, present, future, it could be anywhere on the timeline spectrum. If you could choose any iteration of Natalya and tell them one piece of wisdom, advice, or a word, what iteration would you choose and what would you tell them?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about that time period towards the end of my, like that college time period that I spoke to, and just feeling like I needed to fit in, feeling like I needed to be something different. And so I think I would tell her that, you are enough. So here's a little insight to me. This is my mantra that I'm using lately, my affirmations that, I am enough. I have everything I need, and what is meant for me will be. And so I think I would kind of just instill that into her mind there, and see what that would do. But honestly, and if I can add this little bit, I wouldn't change a thing, right? Because every step I took to get me here is what I needed to do to get me here. And, I'm the happiest and healthiest and most regulated I've ever been. And I'm continuing on that path now. So I have done things that I'm not proud of, but I don't regret the journey. I wouldn't change it.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. Yeah, I wouldn't change anything about that answer. Thank you, Natalya, for coming and sharing your story so open and transparently with our audience. And we will catch you all, listeners, on the next episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.